In the frozen silence of Wyoming's forgotten land, a woman who once saved lives now lives hidden and broken. Mara Quinn, once a celebrated trauma nurse, now limping through life alone, finds a man collapsed in the snow. Cole Stratton, a dying cowboy with no future. With no one to call and no supplies left, Mara does the unthinkable. She chooses to fight for a stranger's life with nothing but courage, firelight, and the last strength of her heart. What follows is a story not just of survival, but of healing, redemption, and the quiet love that blooms where hope once died. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to like the video to support stories that matter. Subscribe for more powerful Western love tales. Comment below. Would you have made the same choice Mara did? And above all, stay with us till the end. The final moment will move you deeply. Thank you for watching, and welcome to our storytelling family.
In the bitter cold of Wyoming's forgotten ranch country, fate brings together two souls, marked by loss. Mara Quinn, a former trauma nurse living with a permanent limp, discovers Cole Stratton, a wealthy rancher and rodeo legend, lying unconscious in the snow near her remote cabin. Once celebrated for saving lives, now shunned by her hospital and abandoned by her fiancé, Mara must decide if she's willing to risk her heart one last time. With nothing but limited medical supplies and sheer determination, she begins the fight. To save Cole's life, through blizzards and shared pain, an unexpected bond forms between two people who thought their chances at love were long buried in the past. But can a broken nurse and a dying cowboy heal more than just physical wounds? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The nursing license card sat in the top drawer of Mara's bedside table, buried beneath old letters and fading get-well cards. She hadn't touched it in months, but its presence haunted her like a ghost of better days. Outside her cabin window, the Wyoming winter painted everything in shades of white and gray, matching the emptiness she'd grown accustomed to. Her morning routine never varied. Wake at 6, just as she had during her hospital shifts. Take 2 pills with lukewarm water, massage the permanently damaged muscles in her left leg until they loosened enough to bear weight. Some days were better than others, but none were what anyone would call good. The coffee maker sputtered to life, its rhythm familiar as an old friend. Mara leaned against the counter, taking pressure off her bad leg while she watched the pot fill. The kitchen window offered a view of the Bighorn. Mountains, their peaks lost in low-hanging clouds that promised more snow. Her nearest neighbor was 3 miles down the dirt road, exactly the kind of isolation she'd sought when she fled Casper 6 months ago. "This is what healing looks like," she murmured to herself, the words bitter as the coffee she poured. The mug trembled slightly in her hand, another lasting gift from the accident. The doctors had called it nerve damage, had promised it might improve with time. They'd said the same about her leg. She settled into her worn armchair, the one she'd positioned to face both the window and the wood stove. The morning paper lay unopened on the side table, delivered weekly by Mrs. Henderson from the general store. In town, the elderly woman's pitying looks were easier to bear than those of her former colleagues at Casper Memorial, where she'd worked in the trauma unit for 12 years before the accident, before the 16-hour shift that ended with her car wrapped around a telephone pole, before the surgery that saved her life but couldn't save her career, before David, her fiancé of 3 years, decided that in sickness and in health was more commitment than he could handle. The grandfather clock in the corner, another remnant of her old life, chimed 7 times. Mara pulled herself up, ignoring the familiar stab of pain. The horses in the neighboring ranch would be waiting for their morning check. It wasn't much of a job, but Burke Henderson paid her to keep an eye on his stock during the winter months, and it gave her a reason to push through the pain each day. She layered up against the cold, thermal underwear, wool sweater, heavy coat. Her boots took longer to lace than they used to. her fingers still clumsy with the lingering nerve damage. The metal cane by the door, sleek and black, chosen for functionality over aesthetics, completed her transformation from healing to healer. Outside, her breath clouded in the frigid air. The sky hung low and heavy, the kind of grey that spoke of snow to come. Her boots crunched across the frozen ground as she made her way to Burke's fence line. The horses would be in the sheltered pasture, where the wind couldn't bite quite so deep. Just another day, she told herself, but her hand instinctively reached for the stethoscope she no longer carried. Old habits died hard, especially the ones born from a lifetime of caring for others. Now her patients were limited to Burke's. Quarter horses and the occasional injured wildlife she found near her cabin. The wind picked up, carrying the first flakes of what the weather service had warned would be a significant storm. Mara pulled her scarf tighter, knowing she should hurry. Back to the cabin soon. But something made her pause, her eyes drawn to movement at the edge of the tree line. At first, she thought it was one of Burke's horses, broken free from the pasture. But as she squinted through the thickening snow, she realized this shape was all wrong, too low to the ground, too still to be anything but trouble. Her leg protested as she changed direction, moving as quickly as she could manage toward the distant figure. The old instincts kicked in, the part of her that had thrived in trauma care taking over before her mind could remind her that she wasn't that person anymore. She was 30 yards away when she realized what she was seeing. Not a horse at all, but a man lying motionless in the snow, and even from this distance she could tell he wasn't moving. The wind whipped snow against Mara's face as she forced herself forward, each step sending shocks of pain through her damaged leg. The figure remained motionless, half buried in the growing drifts. Next to him lay something that caught the weak morning light. A large, ornate rodeo belt buckle, partially covered by snow. "Sir?" Her voice was lost in the wind. "Can you hear?" "Me?" No response. She dropped to her knees beside him, her cane falling forgotten in the snow. The man lay face down, one arm trapped beneath his body. Even through his heavy winter coat, she could see he was powerfully built, though age had silvered the hair at his temples. Years of trauma training took over. Fingers pressed against his neck found a pulse. Weak, but present. His skin was dangerously cold, but not yet showing signs of severe frostbite. She couldn't tell how long he'd been out here, but the fresh snow covering him suggested it hadn't been all night. "Sir, I'm a nurse. Can you hear me?" She carefully turned his head, noting the nasty gash above his right temple. Blood had frozen in his graying hair, telling her this wasn't a simple fall. The man groaned, the first sign of life, and Mara's heart jumped. "Don't move," she commanded, her professional voice returning like muscle memory. "You may have spinal injuries." Her hands moved efficiently, assessing what she could through his clothing. Multiple contusions, possible broken ribs, and the head wound that worried her most. The wind grew stronger, and Mara knew they were running out of time. The storm was moving in faster than predicted, and they were exposed. Her cabin was closer than Burke's ranch house, but it might as well have been miles away given her limitation. The man's eyes fluttered open, revealing pain-clouded blue eyes. "Horse," he mumbled, trying to move. "Stay still," she ordered, then softened her tone. "I'm Mara. I'm going to help you, but I need you to work with me. What's your name?" "Cole," he managed, grimacing. "Cole Stratton." "Horse spooked defense. Save your strength, Mr. Stratton." The name tickled something in her memory, a newspaper article, perhaps, or local gossip at the general store. But there wasn't time to place it now. She spotted his cell phone lying. Several feet away, screen shattered. Her own phone was back in the cabin, not that it would matter. Reception out here was spotty on the best days. The decision made itself. She couldn't leave him to get help. He'd be dead from exposure before she could return. They'd have to make it to her cabin together. "Mr. Stratton, Cole, I have a bad leg so I can't carry you. But if you can stay conscious, we can help each other. Understand?" He nodded slightly, then immediately regretted it, judging by his wince. Mara retrieved her cane, then positioned herself at his side. "This is going to hurt, but we have to move. Ready?" Together they managed to get him sitting, then standing, though he swayed dangerously. He was easily over 6 feet tall, his frame dwarfing her smaller one. She positioned herself under his right arm, using her cane on her left side to create a human crutch. The first step nearly took them both down. Cole tried to stifle a cry of pain, but couldn't quite manage it. Mara's legs screamed in protest at the extra weight, and she tasted blood from biting her lip. "One step at a time," she encouraged, as much for herself as for him. The wind howled around them, the snow now falling so thickly she could barely see 10 feet ahead. She silently thanked God she knew these few acres by heart. They moved in an agonizing shuffle, each step a battle against pain, gravity, and the worsening storm. Cole's consciousness came and went, but his legs kept moving, driven by some deep survival instinct. Mara counted their progress in landmarks she could barely see. The split rail fence, the old oak tree, the stack of firewood that marked her. Property line. When her cabin finally emerged from the whiteout conditions, Mara nearly wept with relief. They were both shaking uncontrollably, clothes frozen stiff, breaths coming in ragged gasps. "Almost there," she promised, though she wasn't sure Cole could hear her anymore. His weight grew heavier with each step, and her leg threatened to buckle. The 3 steps up to her porch might as well have been a mountain. Behind them, half buried in the snow where Cole had fallen, lay the forgotten belt buckle, a champion's. A prize from another life, marking the spot where 2 broken lives had collided in the Wyoming winter. The wind whipped snow against Mara's face as she forced herself forward, each step sending shocks of pain through her damaged leg. The figure remained motionless, half buried in the growing drifts. Next to him lay something that caught the weak. Morning light, a large, ornate rodeo belt buckle, partially covered by snow. "Sir!" Her voice was lost in the wind. "Can you hear me?" No response. She dropped to her knees beside him, her cane falling forgotten in the snow. The man lay face down, one arm trapped beneath his body. Even through his heavy winter coat she could see he was powerfully built, though age had silvered the hair at his temples. Years of trauma training took over. Fingers pressed against his neck found a pulse, weak but present. His skin was dangerously cold, but not yet showing signs of severe frostbite. She couldn't tell how long he'd been out here, but the fresh snow covering him suggested it hadn't been all night. "Sir, I'm a nurse. Can you hear me?" She carefully turned his head, noting the nasty gash above his right temple. Blood had frozen in his graying hair, telling her this wasn't a simple fall. The man groaned, the first sign of life, and Mara's heart jumped. "Don't move," she commanded, her professional voice returning like muscle memory. "You may have spinal injuries." Her hands moved efficiently, assessing what she could through his clothing. Multiple contusions, possible broken ribs, and the head wound that worried her most. The wind grew stronger, and Mara knew they were running out of time. The storm was moving in faster than predicted, and they were exposed. Her cabin was closer than Burke's ranch house, but it might as well have been miles away given her limitation. The man's eyes fluttered open, revealing pain-clouded blue eyes. "Horse," he mumbled, trying to move. "Stay still," she ordered, then softened her tone. "I'm Mara. I'm going to help you, but I need you to work with me. What's your name?" "Cole," he managed, grimacing. "Cole Stratton." "Horse spooked. Fence. Save your strength, Mr. Stratton." The name tickled something in her memory. A newspaper article, perhaps, or local gossip at the general store. But there wasn't time to place it now. She spotted his cell phone lying several feet away, screen shattered. Her own phone was back in the cabin, not that it would matter. Reception out here was spotty on the best days. The decision made itself. She couldn't leave him to get help. He'd be dead from exposure before she could return. They'd have to make it to her cabin together. "Mr. Stratton, Cole, I have a bad leg, so I can't carry you. But if you can stay conscious, we can help each other. Understand?" He nodded slightly, then immediately regretted it, judging by his wince. Mara retrieved her cane, then positioned herself at his side. "This is going to hurt, but we have to move. Ready?" Together they managed to get him sitting, then standing, though he swayed dangerously. He was easily over 6 feet tall, his frame dwarfing her smaller one. She positioned herself under his right arm, using her cane on her left side to create a human crutch. The first step nearly took them both down. Cole tried to stifle a cry of pain, but couldn't quite manage it. Mara's leg screamed in protest at the extra weight, and she tasted blood from biting her lip. "One step at a time," she encouraged, as much for herself as for him. The wind howled around them, the snow now falling so thickly she could barely see 10 feet ahead. She silently thanked God she knew these few acres by heart. They moved in an agonizing shuffle, each step a battle against pain, gravity, and the worsening storm. Cole's consciousness came and went, but his legs kept moving, driven by some deep survival instinct. Mara counted their progress in landmarks she could barely see: the split-rail fence, the old oak tree, the stack of firewood that marked her property line. When her cabin finally emerged from the whiteout conditions, Mara nearly wept with relief. They were both shaking uncontrollably, clothes frozen stiff, breaths coming in ragged gasps. "Almost there," she promised, though she wasn't sure Cole could hear her anymore. His weight grew heavier with each step, and her leg threatened to buckle. The 3 steps up to her porch might as well have been a mountain. Behind them, half buried in the snow where Cole had fallen, lay the forgotten belt buckle, a champion's prize from another life, marking the spot where 2 broken lives had collided in the Wyoming winter. The wallet was worn leather, softened by years of use. Mara hadn't wanted to go through it, but she needed to check for medical alert cards or emergency contacts. As she carefully removed Cole's driver's license, a photograph slipped free, landing face up on her lap. A young woman smiled up at her, early 20s maybe, with Cole's striking blue eyes and an arm thrown around a horse's neck. The back bore a simple inscription: "Sarah and Thunder Spring 2024. The paper was crisp, the colors bright. A recent photo, but well handled, as if viewed often. Cole stirred on the sofa, drawing her attention. The 15 minutes had stretched to 20, and his color was better, though the bruising around his temple had darkened ominously. "Sarah," he mumbled, eyes still closed. "Have to call Sarah. Is that your daughter?" Mara asked softly, tucking the photo back into its place. "The young woman with the horse?" His eyes opened, sharper now, despite the pain. "You went through my wallet, looking for medical information," she explained, professional tone firmly in place. "I'm sorry, but I needed to know if you had any conditions I should be aware of." He seemed to accept this, tension easing from his shoulders. "Sarah's my only family. Things aren't good between us. Not since her mother passed." Mara prepared another ice pack, using the familiar motions to give him space with the admission. "Recent? 3 years ago. Cancer." He accepted the ice pack with a grimace. "Sarah wanted me to sell the ranch, move closer to her in Denver. Said it wasn't safe for me to be running things alone at my age." A bitter laugh turned into a cough. "Guess she was right. How old are you, Mr. Stratton?" "Cole," he corrected. 62, too old to be breaking wild horses, according to my daughter and my doctor and my foreman." He shifted, wincing. "How bad is it?" Mara did another quick assessment, noting improved pupil response. "Concussion, definitely. At least 2 broken ribs. Probably a lot of soft tissue damage we'll discover once the adrenaline wears off completely. You should be in a hospital." "No, hospitals." The words came quick and sharp. "The storms made that decision for us anyway." She gestured to the windows, now completely obscured by blowing snow. "But once it passes," I said, "no hospitals." His voice carried the weight of command, someone used to being obeyed. Then softer. "Sarah would find out. She'd use it as an excuse to take over, sell everything." Mara recognized the fear behind his anger, the same fear that had driven her to this isolated cabin, the terror of losing what little control remained over one's own life. "When did you last speak to her?" she asked, checking his pulse again. Strong, if slightly rapid. Christmas card last year. She sent the photo a few months ago, but he trailed off, eyes distant. I kept meaning to call. Time just slips away when you're alone. The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with shared understanding. Mara thought of her own phone, silent for months except for Mrs. Henderson's weekly check-ins. The horse that threw you, she said finally. Was it a stallion like Thunder in the photo? Similar breeding. I thought. He pressed the ice pack harder against his temple. I've been training horses for 40 years. Thought I could handle anything they threw at me. But you get older, slower. The ground gets harder. Things change, Mara agreed, unconsciously rubbing her bad leg. Whether we're ready or not. Cole's eyes tracked the movement, understanding dawning. Your injury? Recent? 6 months. Car. Accident after a double shift. Black ice, they said, but honestly I was just tired. Stupid. She forced her hands still. Lost my job, my fiancé, my whole life in Casper. But I survived. That's something, right? Survival's not nothing, Cole agreed. His voice was steadier now, more present. But sometimes I wonder if we're all just running from something. Me from getting older, Sarah from losing her mother, you from... He stopped abruptly, color rising in his pale face. I'm sorry, that was out of line. No, Mara surprised herself by saying. It wasn't. Sometimes it takes a stranger to see us clearly. Outside, the storm showed no signs of weakening. The grandfather clock struck noon, though the light through. The snow-covered windows remained a uniform grey. Mara's leg throbbed in time with her heartbeat, and Cole's breathing still caught on his broken ribs. 2 wounded souls, trapped together by circumstance and weather. The photo in Cole's wallet seemed to weigh on them both now, a reminder of connections broken, but not quite lost. Of the possibility that some things, with care and courage, could still be mended. The engagement ring's box sat untouched on her dresser, where she'd placed it the day David left. Now, at 3 in the morning, its outline was barely visible in the darkness as Mara grabbed for her emergency medications. Her hands shook as she heard Cole's labored breathing from the living room, followed by a wet, painful cough. Cole. She limped through the darkness, her leg nearly buckling. She'd pushed it too hard during the rescue, and now she was paying the price. But the sound of his breathing sent her heart racing with professional concern. He was half sitting on the sofa, one arm wrapped around his ribcage, struggling for air. The firelight showed a blue tinge to his lips that triggered every emergency instinct she'd developed in trauma care. Can't breathe, he managed between gasps. Her hands moved automatically, checking his pulse, listening to his chest without a stethoscope. The broken ribs had likely punctured a lung. A tension pneumothorax developing right here in her living room, with nothing but an old medical kit to treat it. Stay with me, she ordered. But her voice wavered. The last time she'd said those words, no. She couldn't think about that night, about the teenage girl on her table, chest crushed from a similar accident, dying while Mara worked her 18th hour. The girl whose death had sent Mara driving home in exhausted despair, straight into that telephone pole. Cole's hand gripped her wrist, his eyes wide with fear and understanding. Even through his own crisis, he saw her slipping away into memory. You've got this, he wheezed. Trust yourself. The words cut through her paralysis. She yanked open the medical kit, mind racing through options. No chest tube, no proper equipment. But there in the bottom of the kit, a large bore needle from her emergency cricothyroidotomy set. This is going to hurt, she warned, already cleaning. An area on his chest. But if I don't release the pressure, do it, he grunted. His trust in her was absolute, despite having known her less than a day. Her hands were steady as she inserted the needle between his ribs, muscle memory taking, over where conscious thought faltered. There was a soft hiss as trapped air escaped, and Cole's next breath came easier. Again, he gasped. Other side. She hesitated. The procedure was risky enough once, but he was right. The breathing wasn't fully improving. Shifting to his other side, she repeated the process, each movement precise despite her exhaustion. This time, his color improved immediately. The blue tinge faded from his lips, replaced by healthy pink. His breathing, while still shallow, lost its desperate edge. "Thank you," he managed after a moment, then studying her face. "You've done that before, too many times." She sat heavily on the coffee table, her legs screaming in protest, usually with better equipment and a whole trauma. "Team backing me up. Seemed pretty good to me." He reached for her hand, squeezed it once. "You didn't freeze. When it mattered, you knew exactly what to do." The words struck deeper than she expected. She'd been so sure that night had broken something essential. In her had destroyed not just her body, but her ability to heal. Yet here she was, 6 months later, still saving lives. "I lost a patient," she found herself saying. "The night of my accident. Teenage girl car crash. I worked on her for hours, but..." She glanced at the ring box, barely visible down the hallway. "David said I was too dedicated to the job, that I should have taken breaks, should have let others take over. He said I drove myself too hard." Sounds like he didn't understand what it means to be needed, Cole replied softly. "To be the one people count on." A log shifted in the fireplace, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, the storm continued its assault, but in here something had shifted. The air felt lighter, as if the release of pressure in Cole's chest had somehow released something in Mara as well. "Rest," she told him, professional again, but with new gentleness. "I'll monitor your breathing. Wake you every hour. If it gets worse, it won't." His confidence surprised her. "Not with you here." Mara settled back in her chair, one hand resting lightly on Cole's wrist to track his pulse. The ring box gleamed faintly from down the hall, but for the first time in months, its presence didn't feel like an accusation. Perhaps David had been right about her dedication, just wrong about it being a flaw. Cole's cracked phone lay on the kitchen counter like a broken promise, its screen spiderwebbed but still occasionally flickering to life. Morning light filtered weakly through snow-crusted windows, casting pale shadows across Mara's small kitchen. The storm had finally settled into a steady snowfall, less violent, but no less isolating. "You're sure you can eat?" Mara asked, sliding a bowl of oatmeal across the table. She'd helped Cole to one of her kitchen chairs. His movements stiff but stronger than the night before. "After what you did for me last night, I'd eat sawdust if you served it." His attempt at humor was undercut by a wince as he shifted position. "Though this looks considerably better. It's not exactly a ranch breakfast," she apologized, adding honey to her own bowl. Her leg felt marginally better after a few hours of actual sleep, though she knew better than to skip her morning medication. "And Cook would approve. Elena's been trying to get me to eat healthier for years." He took a careful bite. "She and Miguel, my foreman, they're probably worried sick by now." Mara glanced at his phone. "We could try charging it. The power's still on, surprisingly." "Sarah's number is in there," he admitted quietly. "Haven't called her since she sent that photo. Kept telling myself I'd do it when I had something better to report, some proof I could still handle things. And now? Now I'm sitting in a stranger's kitchen, alive only because she happened to find me in the snow." He met her eyes. "Puts things in perspective." Mara plugged in his phone, relieved when the charging symbol appeared. "I'm hardly a stranger anymore. Not after performing emergency medicine on your living room couch." That earned a genuine laugh, followed by another wince. "Fair point, though I don't even know your full name." "Quinn. Mara Quinn, formerly of Casper Memorial's trauma unit." She tested the words, surprised to find they didn't hurt as much as usual. "Currently hiding from the world in a cabin in the middle of nowhere." "Not hiding," Cole corrected. "Healing. There's a difference." He took another bite of oatmeal, considering, though sometimes the line gets blurry. The phone suddenly buzzed to life, its screen lighting up with dozens of missed calls and messages. Mara brought it to the table, but Cole made no move to take it. "Elena's probably called the sheriff by now," he said instead. "She's worked for me since Sarah was little, practically raised her after Caroline. My wife got sick." She'll be imagining the worst. You should call her." Mara kept her voice gentle. "And Sarah. And tell them what? That the stubborn old man nearly killed himself trying to prove he's not obsolete." Bitterness crept into his tone. "Sarah's been begging me to sell the ranch for 2 years. Says it's too much for one person, too isolated. This would just prove her right." "Or," Mara suggested, "you could tell them that when faced with a life-threatening situation, you had the strength to survive and the wisdom to accept help. That's not weakness, Cole. That's grace." He stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "You rehearse that speech in the mirror every morning?" "Maybe I should." She smiled slightly. "Might have saved me 6 months of self-pity." The phone buzzed again, and this time Cole reached for it. His hands trembled slightly, from pain or emotion, Mara couldn't tell, as he scrolled through the messages. "Sarah's texted 8 times since yesterday," he said softly. "The last one just says, 'Please be okay, Dad.'" His voice caught on the last word. Mara busied herself clearing their bowls, giving him privacy as he pressed the call button. She could hear his side of the conversation from the sink. The careful explanation, the gentle reassurances, the promise to be more careful. "Yes, I'm being well taken care of," he said at one point, catching Mara's eye. "There's a former trauma nurse here who's keeping me alive despite my best efforts to the contrary." When he finally ended the call, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "Sarah's driving up from Denver as soon as the road's clear. Says she doesn't care about the ranch, just wants to see her old man." "Sounds like you both needed this wake-up call," Mara observed, returning to the table. "Maybe we all did." He regarded her thoughtfully. "When's the last time you called your family?" The question caught her off guard. Her parents in Minnesota, their calls growing less frequent as she retreated further into isolation. Her sister in Seattle, whose wedding she'd missed during her recovery. The phone lay between them on the table, no longer just Cole's broken device, but a symbol of all the connections they'd both allowed to fracture. The yellowed newspaper clipping fell from Cole's wallet while Mara was helping him change his bandages. "Local Legends Last Ride, Stratton Ends, Career After Near-Fatal Fall," the headline declared. The photo showed a younger Cole astride a massive black bull, his face set in fierce concentration. The date, March 15th, 2005. "I wondered why your name sounded familiar," Mara said, picking up the article. "You were famous. Infamous, maybe." Cole held still as she checked his ribs, but his eyes were distant, lost in memory. 8-time regional champion, 3-time national finalist, then one bad landing ended it all. Broke 6 ribs, punctured a lung, not unlike yesterday. Mara's hands paused on his bruised torso. "That's why you knew what was happening. You'd been through it before. Difference is, back then I had a whole medical team waiting to scrape me off the arena floor." His attempt at humor fell flat. "Caroline was pregnant with Sarah. The doctors said I'd never ride competitively again. My sponsors dropped me overnight." "But you kept the article." Mara resumed bandaging, her touch professional but gentle. The morning sun had grown stronger, casting his injuries in stark relief. Reminder of what pride costs. He winced as she secured the wrap. "I thought I was invincible back then. Thought I could keep pushing limits forever. Now here I am, 20 years later, still making the same damn mistakes." "Are they the same?" Mara settled into her chair, leg protesting the morning's activities. "Yesterday, you weren't performing for a crowd. You were working your own land, living the life you chose. Living it alone," he corrected. "Caroline would have hated that. She always said the ranch was meant for family, not solitude. After she died," he trailed off, studying the old photo. "Sarah tried to stay, gave up a job in Denver, moved back home. But I couldn't let her sacrifice her life for mine. Told her to go, live her own dreams. Didn't realize until she was gone that maybe her dreams and mine weren't so different." The grandfather clock chimed 9. Its sound almost lost in the continuing storm. Mara found herself looking at the newspaper photo differently, not seeing the champion at his peak, but the father who'd given up one dream to protect another. "My mother was a nurse," she said suddenly. Everyone expected me to burn out like... She did, working doubles in the ER until her health gave out. David certainly thought I would, but it wasn't the hours that broke me or even the accident. It was losing the ability to help people, to make a difference. Seems to me you're still making quite a difference. Cole's voice was quiet but firm. Or did someone else save my life last night? That was muscle memory, training. But even as she said it, Mara knew it wasn't entirely true. Last night had required more than medical knowledge. It had needed the core of who she was. The healer she'd thought was lost. You know what I see in that old photo? Cole handed her the clipping. Not the rider, but the bull. 2,000 pounds of raw power, and all you need to survive is the strength to hold on and the wisdom to know when to let go. Took me 20 years to learn the second part. Mara studied the image again. The younger Cole's expression wasn't just concentration, it was joy. Pure and uncomplicated. Do you miss it? The rodeo, the roar of the crowd, the adrenaline. He shook his head slowly. Not as much as I miss Sunday dinners with Sarah, or the way Caroline used to laugh at my swagger after a win. Fame is flashy, but it doesn't keep you warm at night. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the soft tick of the clock and the muted howl of the wind. Mara realized she'd been absently rubbing her bad leg, an old habit that drew Cole's knowing gaze. Your turn, he said. What do you miss most? The hospital, the engagement, the life you had planned? The question should have hurt, but somehow, sitting here with the morning sun painting shadows across Cole's weathered face, it didn't. I miss feeling whole, she admitted. But maybe that's the trap. Maybe we're not meant to stay whole. Maybe. We're meant to keep breaking and healing, learning new ways to be strong. Cole reached over and carefully folded the old newspaper clipping, tucking it away. Sounds like the kind of wisdom worth getting thrown off a horse for, or wrapping your car around a telephone pole. Her smile was tentative but real. Or that. He matched her smile with his own, lines crinkling around his eyes. Though personally, I'd have preferred we both learned our lessons some easier way. The storm outside was beginning to ease, patches of blue appearing between snow clouds. Soon, the roads would clear and Sarah would arrive, and the quiet bubble of understanding they'd created would burst. But for now, they sat together in the strengthening sunlight, two people learning that some scars were meant to be shared, not hidden. The nearly empty bottle of pain medication sat accusingly on Mara's bathroom counter. 2 pills left. Enough. For one more day if she was careful. She hadn't planned on having to share her limited medical supplies with an injured cowboy during a snowstorm. You're limping worse, Cole observed when she returned to the living room. He'd insisted on sitting, up in the armchair, though the effort had left him pale and sweating, taking anything for it, trying not to. She eased into her own chair, unable to completely hide her grimace. Need to keep a clear head to monitor you. And here I thought I was being subtle about watching you favor that leg. His voice was light, but his eyes were shrewd. Guess we're both pretty good at spotting other people's pain. Outside, the storm had settled into a steady snowfall, the earlier violence replaced by a quiet that felt almost expectant. The grandfather clock showed just past noon, though the heavy clouds made it feel later. It's mostly nerve damage, Mara found herself saying. The doctors said it might improve with time, but she gestured vaguely at her leg. The muscles, never healed quite right. Some days are better than others. And today I helped drag a grown man through a snowstorm. She attempted a smile. Probably set my physical therapy back a month. I'm sorry. The words were simple, but heavy. With genuine regret. Don't be, it was worth it. Their eyes met, held. Though I have to ask, what possessed you to work with that horse alone? Cole shifted in his chair, wincing. Pride, stubbornness, the usual sins of aging men. He paused, considering. Thunder, the stallion. He reminded me of ones I used. To ride. Thought if I could just prove I hadn't lost my touch. You could prove Sarah wrong about the ranch being too much. Something like that. He rubbed his bandaged ribs absently. Pain's a funny thing. Sometimes you court it just to prove you can still feel. The observation struck uncomfortably close to home. How many times had Mara pushed her rehabilitation too far, seeking that edge of pain that meant she was still fighting? I used to think I understood pain, she said slowly. Working in trauma, you see every variety, but experiencing it yourself. She shook her head. It's different when it's permanent, when you wake up knowing it'll be there, faithful as a shadow. Makes you appreciate the good moments more. Cole's voice was quiet. Caroline used to say that, near the end when the cancer... He stopped, swallowed hard. She'd have these moments of perfect clarity, no pain, and she'd say they were sweeter because she knew what was coming. Mara felt the familiar weight of medical helplessness, the same feeling she'd had watching that teenage girl slip away. I'm sorry about Caroline. 3 years this spring. He looked around the cabin, taking in the sparse furniture, the medical supplies still scattered from last night. She would have liked you. No nonsense, straight to the point. Good hands. The compliment warmed her unexpectedly. Sounds like quite a woman. She was. Taught school in town, rode as well as any ranch hand, raised Sarah mostly alone while I was chasing rodeo glory. His smile was bittersweet. I kept thinking we'd have time later, after my last season, after Sarah grew up, after... There's always an after. Until there isn't. The truth of it settled between them like the snow outside, silent but heavy with meaning. Mara thought of her own afters, after the accident, after physical therapy, after she felt whole again. How many moments had she lost waiting for a future that might never arrive? A spasm gripped her leg, sharp enough to draw a hiss of pain. Cole reached out instinctively, his hand finding hers across the space between their chairs. Breathe through it, he advised, his grip warm and steady. Like you told me last night. She focused on his hand, on the strength still evident in his weathered fingers. The pain peaked, then slowly ebbed, leaving behind its usual dull throbbing. Thank you, she managed, but didn't pull away. His hand remained, offering comfort that had nothing to do with medical necessity. Seems fair, he said softly. You've been holding me together since yesterday. The snow continued to fall outside, but in here something was thawing. Two people who'd learned to carry their pain alone, suddenly remembering what it meant to share the load. We should check your bandages, Mara said finally, though she made no move to break their connection. In a minute. Cole's thumb traced, a gentle circle on her palm. Sometimes the medicine isn't what heals you. The old radio crackled with static, offering only fragments of the emergency broadcast through the storm's interference. Roads closed. Severe conditions. Stay indoors. Mara adjusted the dial, seeking better reception, but the weather report remained stubbornly unclear. That doesn't sound promising, Cole observed from his chair. Evening was settling in, and with it a new intensity to the storm. The wind had picked up again, rattling the windows with renewed fury. We're running low on everything, Mara admitted, switching off the useless radio. Bandages, antibiotics, pain medication. If your ribs get worse, they won't. But his attempt at reassurance was undermined by a sudden cough that left him gripping his side, face contorted in pain. Mara moved to him without thinking, her hands gentle but sure as she checked his breathing. Your lung sounds aren't great. If it collapses again, you'll save me again. His hand caught hers where it rested on his chest, holding it against his heartbeat. You seem to have a knack for it. The touch sent warmth through her that had nothing to do with medical concern. Their faces were close, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Cole, she started, not sure if she was warning him or herself. I haven't been whole, he finished softly. Neither have I. Not for years. His other hand rose to touch her cheek. Calloused fingers impossibly gentle. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. The grandfather clock struck 6, its chimes mixing with the howl of the wind. In the fading daylight, shadows played across Cole's face, softening the lines of pain, highlighting the strength that remained. I'm not good at this anymore, Mara whispered. Trusting. letting people in. And I'm not good at admitting I need help. His thumb traced her cheekbone. But here we are. The kiss, when it came, was as natural as breathing. Soft at first, tentative, then deepening with a hunger that surprised them both. Mara felt the years of loneliness melting away, replaced by a warmth that spread through her entire body. Cole pulled back first, his breathing slightly ragged. "I should apologize," he said, though his hand still cradled her face. "Taking advantage of my nurse's kindness." "I'm not your nurse." Mara surprised herself with the firmness of her tone. "And you're not taking advantage of anything." A particularly strong gust rattled the cabin, making them both jump. The fire had burned low, casting the room in shadow. Outside, the storm showed. No signs of relenting. "We should check the generator," Mara said reluctantly, professional instincts reasserting themselves. "If the power goes, it can wait 5 minutes. Cole's voice was rough with emotion. "Unless you're running away." The question hung between them, heavy with meaning. Running away. Wasn't that what she'd been doing these past 6 months? Running from failure, from pain, from the possibility of caring too much again? "No," she said finally. "No more running." She leaned in, resting her forehead against his. "But if you tear those stitches, I'm going to be very annoyed." His laugh rumbled through both of them. "Duly noted." He brushed another kiss across her lips, lighter this time but no less meaningful. "Though I have to say, this is the most pleasant medical treatment I've ever received. Don't get used to it. Once Sarah gets here, I'm telling her exactly how amazing you are." His tone was serious now. "How you saved my life, how you trusted your training even when you doubted yourself. How you showed me that sometimes asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom." Mara felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "You're a sweet talker, Stratton." "No." He shook his head slightly. "I'm just a man who's finally learning to see clearly, even if it took a concussion to get there." Another blast of wind shook the cabin, and this time the lights flickered ominously, reality intruding on their moment of connection. "Generator," Mara said firmly, pulling back, "and fresh bandages, and maybe some actual food that isn't oatmeal." "Yes, ma'am." Cole's smile was warm enough to chase away the gathering shadows. "Though for the record, I'd eat nothing but oatmeal for the rest of my life if it meant more moments like this." Mara felt an answering smile tugging at her lips as she helped him stand. Outside, the storm raged on, but in here, something had broken through. As unstoppable as spring thaw after the longest winter. The hospital ID badge had slipped behind her dresser months ago, and Mara had left it there, too raw to deal with the smiling face of her former self. Now searching for extra blankets as the generator sputtered outside, she found it again. Dr. Mara Quinn, Trauma Unit Lead, her photograph bright-eyed and confident beneath the Casper Memorial logo. "You never mentioned you were the unit lead," Cole said from the doorway, where he'd insisted on following despite her protests about his ribs. The generator had refused to start, and the temperature in the cabin was dropping steadily. It didn't seem relevant. She tucked the badge into her pocket, but the weight of it felt like an anchor. "Not anymore. Like the fact you were up for Chief of Emergency Medicine." His voice was gentle, but the question still made her flinch. "Elena's grandson works at Casper Memorial. She mentioned it when I called earlier." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the wind's endless howling. The flashlight beam caught dust motes dancing in the air, making them look like snow inside the cabin. "I was 38, Mara said finally, youngest candidate they'd ever considered for the position. David had just proposed. My career was peaking. Everything was... She swallowed hard. "Perfect. Too perfect, maybe." "Tell me," Cole encouraged softly. "Not the version you tell yourself at night. The real story." Mara sank onto the edge of her bed, leg throbbing in the cold. Cole settled carefully beside her, close enough to share warmth, far enough to give her space. Her name was Jenny Martinez. 16 years old, prom dress still in the back of the wrecked car. I'd been on shift for... She closed her eyes, remembering. 18 hours. We were short-staffed, always were in trauma, and I wouldn't leave. Couldn't leave. She looked so much like my niece. The girl you lost, Cole said. Not a question. I worked on her for 3 hours, kept her heart beating, kept pushing blood, kept trying everything I knew. The other doctors wanted to call it, but I was the unit lead. My call. Her laugh was bitter. My responsibility. She pulled the badge from her pocket, ran her thumb over its smooth surface. When she died, I should have stayed. Should have talked to the family, done the paperwork, followed procedure. Instead, I ran, got in my car, and just drove. Didn't even call David. Couldn't face him knowing I'd failed. The accident wasn't your fault, Cole said firmly. Wasn't it? I was exhausted, emotional, definitely shouldn't have been driving. The black ice was just an excuse. She gestured at her leg. This was karma. Universe's way of saying I had no business trying to save lives when I couldn't even stop. Cole's voice was sharp enough to cut through her spiral. You're doing it again. Taking everything on yourself, carrying weight that isn't yours to bear. That's rich, coming from someone who won't let his daughter help with the ranch? Exactly. He caught her hand, squeezed it. Maybe we're both too good at martyring ourselves, too proud to admit we're human. The flashlight beam wavered, batteries warning of their impending failure. In the dimming light, Mara studied Cole's face, the lines of pain and wisdom, the gentleness that balanced his strength. They offered me disability, she admitted, a desk job in administration. David thought I should take it, said it was time to slow down anyway, but the thought of watching others do what I couldn't anymore. So you came here to hide? To heal, she corrected, echoing his words from earlier. At least that's what I told myself. But maybe I was just punishing myself for Jenny, for not being perfect, for letting everyone down. Cole shifted closer, his arm wrapping carefully around her shoulders. You know what I see in that badge photo? Not perfection, passion, purpose, the same fire that made you run out into a snowstorm to save a stubborn old cowboy. Not so old, Mara murmured, leaning into his warmth. Old enough to know that sometimes our worst moments lead us exactly where we need to be. He pressed a kiss to her temple, though preferably with a working generator. As if in response, the lights flickered. Bunsen died completely, plunging the cabin into darkness, broken only by their failing flashlight. Well, Mara said after a moment, I guess we'll find out if I'm still good in a crisis. Sweetheart, Cole's voice was warm in the darkness. That was never really in doubt. The badge slipped from her fingers, landing softly on the carpet. In the dark, she couldn't see the confident smile of her former self anymore, but somehow that felt right. That woman was part of her story, but not its ending. The Christmas ornament tumbled from Cole's jacket pocket as Mara helped him into warmer layers. A small silver star, tarnished with age, but still catching what little light remained. In the darkness of the powerless cabin, it seemed to hold a glimmer of hope. Sarah made it, Cole explained, carefully picking it up. First-grade art project. Caroline hung it front and center every year, even after the glitter started falling off. His voice softened. I've carried it since the funeral. Silly, maybe. Not silly. Mara added another log to the fireplace, their only source of heat now. The temperature had dropped dangerously low, and the storm showed no signs of breaking. You're keeping her close. Was supposed to give it back to Sarah this Christmas. He turned the star over in his hands. Had this whole plan. Invite her to the ranch, try to mend things, even started clearing out Caroline's old studio for her. Sarah always wanted to paint like her mother. Mara settled beside him on the sofa, sharing the thick blanket she'd found. Their breath fogged in the cold air. You can still do that, if we survive the night. But his attempt at gallows humor fell flat as another violent shiver racked his body. The cold was dangerous for him, especially with his injuries. We need to think about options, Mara said, professional tone masking her worry. The roads are closed, but Burke's ranch is only 3 miles down. If I could make it— No. Cole's hand found hers under the blanket. Not in this weather, not with your leg. We wait it out. Your ribs are holding steady. He squeezed her fingers. Thanks to you. The fire popped and crackled, sending shadows dancing across the walls. Outside, the wind's howl had taken on an almost musical quality, a winter's lament. Tell me about your plans, Mara said suddenly. For the ranch, for Sarah, tell me everything you haven't said to her yet. Cole was quiet for a moment, thumb absently tracing patterns on her palm. The north pasture, he started slowly. It has this view of the mountains at sunset that takes your breath away. Sarah used to set up her easel there in high school before. He swallowed. I thought maybe we could build her a proper studio. Something with big windows, good light. A place of her own. She'd like that, maybe, if she still paints, if she'd even consider staying more than a few days. The star caught the firelight, sending tiny reflections across their faces. There's so much I should have said, should have done differently. Like what? Mara prompted gently. Like telling her I was proud of her career in Denver, instead of just focusing on who'd run the ranch. Like admitting I was scared of becoming useless, of losing the only life I knew how to live. His voice roughened. Like saying I missed her mother too damn much to change a single thing in this place. Because sometimes memory is all we have left, until it becomes a prison, Mara said softly, thinking of her own self-imposed exile. Until we find someone who helps us see beyond it. Cole turned to face her, his expression serious in the firelight. Mara, when this storm breaks, don't. She pressed her fingers to his lips. Not yet, not because we're cold and scared and feeling vulnerable. He kissed her fingertips before drawing them away. I was going to say, when this storm breaks, I'd like to show you the north pasture and the valley where the wildflowers bloom in spring. And maybe, he took a shaky breath, maybe we could talk about what healing really looks like. For both of us, the silver star twinkled between them. A promise of possibilities. Mara thought of her apartment in Casper, still packed in boxes. Of the medical journals she'd stopped reading, the calls she'd stopped taking. I'm not ready to go back to trauma medicine, she said quietly. Maybe not ever. No one's asking you to. But there's a clinic in town that could use someone with your skills. People here, they understand taking life at a different pace. His eyes held hers, and they understand that sometimes the worst storms bring the greatest gifts. A log shifted in the fireplace, sending up a shower of sparks. Mara found herself imagining it, a life not defined by what she'd lost, but by what she might find. Morning rides across snow-covered fields, evening talks on a ranch house porch, the chance to heal others without sacrificing herself. Sarah's inversed Christmas back, she said slowly. You should hang this star right where Caroline always did. Cole's smile was brighter than any ornament. Only if you help me put it there. The wind outside seemed to ease slightly, as if nature itself were listening to their tentative plans, their careful hope. The star caught the light one more time before Cole tucked it safely away, not in his pocket this time, but on the mantel above the fire. For now, he said softly, pulling Mara closer, it belongs where we can both see it. The truck keys felt impossibly heavy in Mara's hand, as dawn broke over a world transformed by ice. The storm had finally paused, leaving behind an eerie stillness, broken only by the occasional crack of frozen branches. The temperature in the cabin had dropped to dangerous levels during the night, their breath forming crystals in the air. We don't have a choice, she said, as much to convince herself as Cole. His color had worsened overnight, the cold aggravating his injuries. The fire's almost out, no power, and you're showing signs of pneumonia. And your leg? Cole watched her from the sofa, wrapped in every blanket they could find. In this cold, we'll have to manage. She tried to keep her voice steady, though they both knew the bitter cold would make her injury far worse. Burke's ranch is closer than town, but the main road will be plowed first. Our best chance is heading east. The truck was her one luxury. After the accident, a powerful four-wheel drive she'd bought specifically for Wyoming winters. Now it might be their lifeline if they could reach it. 20 yards had never looked so far. Together, Cole insisted, struggling to his feet. Like before, you can barely stand and you can barely walk. Perfect match. His attempted humor was undermined by a racking cough that left him gasping. Besides, you'll need help clearing. The snow from the truck. They dressed in layers, Mara helping Cole with his boots when bending proved impossible. Every medical supply that could fit went into her emergency bag, along with the last of their water and some granola bars. "Ready?" she asked, holding up the keys. "No," he admitted, managing a pained smile. "But when has that ever stopped either of us?" The cold hit like a physical blow as they opened the door. Snow had drifted halfway up the porch steps, pristine and deadly in the early light. Mara's leg seized immediately, nearly buckling, but Cole's arm around her waist kept her upright. "Breathe," he reminded her, echoing her words from that first night. One step at a time, they moved together, each compensating for the other's weakness. The snow was chest-high in places, and every step was a battle. Mara's legs screamed in protest, while Cole's breathing grew more labored. But they pushed on, counting steps, sharing strength. "Almost there," Mara encouraged, as the truck's outline emerged from the snow. "Just need to clear the doors and hood. And the exhaust pipe," Cole added between breaths. "Can't risk carbon monoxide." The work was excruciating. Their gloved hands scraped at frozen snow, creating a path to the driver's side. Cole had to stop every few minutes, coughing so hard it made Mara's ribs ache in sympathy. Her own leg had gone from pain to an alarming numbness. Finally, the door creaked open. The interior was freezing, but it was shelter. Mara helped Cole into the passenger seat before limping around to the driver's side, each step an exercise in willpower. The key slid into the ignition. They both held their breath. Nothing. "Come on," Mara whispered, trying again. The engine cranked, weakly but wouldn't catch. "Please." Cole's hand found hers on the key. "One more time." Together. The engine coughed, sputtered, and finally roared to life. The sound was beautiful as music. "That's my girl," Mara breathed, patting the dashboard. Slowly, blessed heat began to seep from the vents. "Both of you," Cole said softly, and something in his voice made her turn. He was watching her with a mixture of pride and concern that made her heart twist. "You're the strongest person I've ever met. You know that?" says the man who survived 2 collapsed lungs in one lifetime. She tried to flex her nearly frozen leg, wincing. "We're not out of this yet." "No," he agreed, reaching for her hand again, "but at least we're not facing it alone anymore." The road ahead was invisible under feet of snow, and they had no way of knowing if help was coming from either direction. The truck's 4-wheel drive was good, but the ice underneath would be treacherous. One wrong move. "I need you to stay." "Awake," Mara said, shifting into drive. "Keep talking. Tell me about the spring wildflowers you promised to show me." "Purple lupine," Cole began as they inched forward. "Blankets the whole north pasture. And these tiny yellow flowers Sarah used to weave into crowns." His voice was hoarse but determined, giving them both something to focus on besides the danger. The truck crept along what they hoped was the road, their world narrowed to the small space, illuminated by headlights. Behind them, Mara's cabin disappeared into the whiteness. Ahead lay either salvation or disaster, but they were moving, together. And sometimes Mara realized that was the only kind of hope you needed. The hand-drawn map lay crumpled between them, rendered nearly useless by the whiteout conditions that had descended again. Mara had sketched it before leaving, marking the safest route to town. But now they sat stranded where the road should have been, the truck's wheels spinning helplessly in deep snow. "We missed the turn," Cole said, squinting through frosted windows. His breathing had worsened during their hour-long crawl through the storm, each word seemingly drawn from deeper reserves of strength. "That cluster of pines back there, they mark Henderson's property line, which means we're too far north." Mara fought down a wave of despair. The truck's heater was their only defense against the cold, and the gas gauge was dropping steadily. Her leg had progressed from numbness to a deep, burning pain that made every movement an agony. "We need to turn back," Cole said quietly. "Find the cabin before we run out of fuel. If we can find it." Mara's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "And if we do, what then? Wait to freeze or—" She couldn't finish the thought, but Cole's hand found her arm. "Better than dying out here." As if in response, the engine coughed once, twice, and the truck shuddered. "No," Mara whispered. "No, no, no." She turned the key, but the engine only wheezed. The gas gauge hadn't been accurate. Empty meant empty, and now they sat exposed to the full fury of the returning storm. Cole started coughing, the sound wet and painful. When he drew his hand away from his mouth, Mara saw flecks of blood on his glove. "Internal bleeding," she said flatly. "Your ribs have shifted. Been through worse." But his attempt at bravado was undermined by another coughing fit. Mara pulled out the map again, trying to think through their options. The paper shook in her hands. From cold or fear, she wasn't sure anymore. "Burke's ranch has to be within 2 miles of here," she said, tracing the route they should have taken. "If we follow the tree line, you can't walk that far." Cole's voice was firm despite his weakness. "Not in this cold, not with your leg. And you can't stay here." She turned to face him fully. "The bleeding will get worse, without proper medical attention." The unspoken truth hung between them. They were both running out of time. Cole reached over, his cold fingers tracing her cheek. "You know what Caroline used to say about impossible choices." Mara leaned into his touch, memorizing the feel of his hand. "What?" "She said they only seem impossible because we're trying to find a perfect answer." His eyes, despite the pain clouding them, held hers steadily. "Sometimes you have to choose the path you can live with, not the one that saves everything. I can't leave you here." The words came out fierce, surprising them both with their intensity. "Not after saving my life?" His smile was gentle. "Seems to me you've more than fulfilled any obligation there." "It's not about obligation." Mara's voice cracked. "You know that." "I do." He pulled her closer, pressing his forehead to hers. "Which is why you have to go, because I can't watch you die trying to save me. Not you." The wind rocked the truck, a mournful howl that seemed to echo Mara's inner turmoil. The map crumpled, further in her grip as memories flashed through her mind. Jenny Martinez on her table, David walking away, all the times she'd fought so hard to save others only to lose them anyway. "You're asking me to choose," she whispered. "I'm asking you to live." Cole's voice was barely audible over the storm. "To take all that passion for healing and use it somewhere warm, with proper equipment and people who need your skills. To stop punishing yourself for things you couldn't control. And what about you?" Her voice was thick with unshed tears. "What about Sarah, the ranch, all those plans we just made?" "Plans are funny things." He managed a weak chuckle that turned into another cough. "Sometimes they're just God's way of giving us something to hope for while he works out what we really need." The map slipped from Mara's fingers, landing between them like a challenge. Stay and likely die together, or leave and live with the choice forever. No perfect answers, just paths we can live with, or paths we can't. The emergency flare felt like lead in Mara's pocket as she made her decision. One shot at salvation, but only if she could find help before the cold claimed them both. She'd found it in the truck's emergency kit, their last hope against the gathering darkness. "I'm not leaving," she said, her voice steady despite the cold. "But I'm not staying here to freeze either." She turned to Cole, whose eyes had begun to take on the dangerous glassiness of hypothermia. "We're doing this my way now, Mara." "No," she cut him off with a firmness that surprised them both. "I didn't spend 12 years in trauma to give up now, and I didn't find you in that snow just to lose you in it." Moving quickly despite her screaming leg, she began gathering their supplies, the emergency blankets, what remained of their water, the medical kit. Her mind worked with the clarity. that had once made her the youngest trauma lead in Casper Memorial's history. "We can't stay in the truck. It's becoming a freezer, but we can't wander blindly either." She checked Cole's pulse, noting its dangerous sluggishness. "We need shelter, and we need to be visible when help comes." "If help comes," Cole corrected. Weakly, when? She wouldn't accept any other possibility. "Sarah's on her way, remember, and Burke's ranch hands will be looking once the storm breaks. We just have to survive until then." The wind howled around the truck, but beneath its cry, Mara heard something else. A deeper sound, like wood creaking. She rolled down the window a crack, ignoring the blast of Arctic air. "There," she said, pointing into the whiteness. "That. And down, it's the old covered bridge. Burke mentioned it crosses the creek about half a mile from his property." Cole's eyes sharpened slightly. "You're sure?" "No. But it's better than slowly freezing here." She squeezed his hand. "Think you can make it that far?" His laugh was more of a wheeze. "Not much choice, is there?" Getting out of the truck nearly broke them both. The cold hit like a physical blow, and Mara's leg buckled immediately. But Cole caught her, and she steadied him, and somehow they found themselves standing in the knee-deep snow. "Direction!" Cole managed between violent shivers. Mara held up the flare, calculating. The wind was coming from the north, which meant, "This way. Keep the wind on our right shoulders." They moved like creatures in a nightmare, slow, stumbling, each step and battle against nature itself. Cole's breathing grew more labored, and Mara could no longer feel her feet, but they kept going, guided by the distant creaking of wood and sheer determination. "Talk to me," Mara demanded when she felt Cole starting to drift. "Tell me about Sarah. What will you say when you see her?" "Sorry," he mumbled through blue-tinged lips. "So sorry for being stubborn old fool." "What else?" "Proud of her. Always was, just scared of being left behind." Another step, another. The sound of the bridge grew louder, but the darkness was gathering faster than their progress. "Keep going," Mara encouraged, though her own vision was beginning to blur. "Tell me more." "Tell her about you," Cole managed. "How you showed me strength isn't always—" He stumbled, pulling them both down into the snow. Mara's leg exploded in agony as she tried to break their fall, but she bit back her cry of pain. "Not now, not when they were so close." "Up," she ordered, her trauma voice cutting through Cole's growing confusion. "On your feet, Cowboy. Sarah's waiting." "Can't. You can, you will." She pulled him up with strength she didn't know she had left. "Because I love you, damn it, and I'm not losing anyone else to this snow." The words hung in the frozen air between them, surprising them both. Cole's eyes cleared for a moment, focusing on her face with startling intensity. "Say that again," he whispered. "Later," but she smiled through her tears. "When we're warm and safe, and you can properly appreciate my terrible timing." A dark shape loomed suddenly through the snow. The bridge, its wooden walls offering blessed shelter from the wind. They practically fell through its entrance, collapsing against the inner wall. Mara's hands shook as she pulled out the flare, but her voice was steady. "Help will come. We just have to let them know where to find us." The flare's red light burst against the darkness like a prayer, casting their sanctuary in crimson shadows. Cole pulled her close, sharing what little warmth remained between them. "Terrible timing," he murmured against her hair. "Perfect woman." Outside, the storm raged on, but inside their wooden haven, two hearts beat in stubborn defiance of the cold, waiting for dawn to find them. The hospital bracelet on Mara's wrist felt different this time. Not a badge of failure, but a testament to survival. From her bed in Casper Memorial's emergency department, she could see Cole in the next room, surrounded by medical staff, and, most importantly, his daughter Sarah. "Multiple rib fractures, moderate hypothermia, early pneumonia," Dr. Chen was saying, his familiar voice bringing back memories of countless trauma rounds. "But you probably already diagnosed all that, didn't you, Mara?" She managed a weak smile. "Old habits." "Good habits," he corrected. "Burke's ranch hands said they might have missed the bridge entirely, if not for your flare." quick thinking under pressure, just like the Mara Quinn I remember. Through the window, she watched Sarah clutching her father's hand, tears streaming down her face. The young woman was exactly as her photo had suggested, Cole's eyes, but softer features that must have come from Caroline. She'd arrived at the hospital just minutes after the ambulance, having driven through the night from Denver. "Your leg's going to need attention," Dr. Chen continued, checking her chart. "The exposure aggravated the nerve damage, but Dr. Santos, in physical medicine, has some new techniques I'd like to hear about them," Mara interrupted, surprising herself as much as her former colleague. "The techniques, and anything else that's changed in the department since I left?" Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. "Really? Last I heard you were done with medicine." "I was done with trauma." She watched a nurse adjust Cole's oxygen, remembered her own hands performing similar tasks countless times. But maybe there are other ways to heal people. Before Chen could respond, Sarah appeared in the doorway. Her eyes were red but determined. "Ms. Quinn, I'm Sarah Stratton. Could we talk?" Chen patted Mara's shoulder. "I'll check back later. And Mara, welcome home." The words hit harder than she expected. Home. Was it still, after everything? Sarah took the chair beside Mara's bed, her movements hesitant. Up close, she looked exhausted but relieved. "The doctors said if you hadn't been there, if you hadn't known what to do." She swallowed hard. "Thank you doesn't seem enough. How is he?" "Stubborn." Sarah smiled through fresh tears. "Keeps trying to tell the nurses he's fine, even with an oxygen mask on. But they say he'll recover, thanks to you." "He saved me too," Mara said quietly, "in ways that don't show up on medical charts." Sarah studied her for a moment, so much like her father in her directness. "He told me about the ranch, about wanting to build me a studio, about trying to find ways to bridge the distance between us." She twisted her hands in her lap. "I thought he was just being stubborn about selling, about not wanting change. I never realized that he was scared of losing you completely." "Yeah." Sarah wiped her eyes. "God, we're both so bad at this, at talking about what matters." Through the window they could see Cole fighting sleep, his eyes drifting constantly to Mara's room, even now trying to watch over her. "The studio," Mara said carefully. "The one with the view of the north pasture. It's a good idea. You think?" "So?" Sarah's voice was hopeful. "I mean, I have my job in Denver, but maybe I could come up sometimes, paint on weekends, help with the ranch when Dad needs it, which is more often than he admits. I think," Mara said, choosing her words carefully, "that your father would like nothing better, and maybe the ranch could use someone with medical training around, just in case another stubborn cowboy needs saving." Sarah's eyes widened slightly as understanding dawned. "You mean you'd stay, even after all this? If that's something you'd be comfortable with." Mara touched her hospital bracelet, feeling its plastic surface like a bridge between her past and future. "The clinic in town needs help, and your father's promised to show me where the wildflowers bloom in spring. Dad said you were remarkable." Sarah's smile was watery, but genuine. "He didn't mention you were crazy enough to match him." High praise. Coming from a Stratton. They shared a laugh that felt like the beginning of something. Through the window, Cole had finally lost his battle with sleep, his face peaceful for the first time since Mara had found him in the snow. "The north pasture really is beautiful at sunset," Sarah said softly. "Mom used to say it was like God was painting just for us." She reached over and squeezed Mara's hand. I think she'd be glad you found Dad, that you found each other." The hospital bracelet caught the fluorescent light, no longer a reminder of what Mara had lost, but a symbol of what she might help build, a new kind of healing, a new kind of home. "So," Sarah said, her eyes twinkling just like her father's, "should we tell him about the studio when he wakes up, or let him think it's his idea?" Outside the hospital windows, the Wyoming winter continued its reign. But in here, spring felt closer than ever. The family photo sat propped on Cole's hospital nightstand, taken just hours before. A simple smartphone snapshot that captured everything. Sarah sat on the edge of her father's bed, Cole's arm around her shoulders, while Mara perched in the visitor's chair, her cane leaning forgotten against the wall, all three smiling, tired but genuine, as Christmas Eve sunlight streamed through the window. "First family photo in 3 years," Sarah mused, adjusting her father's pillows. "And it's in a hospital room." Mom would have loved the irony. "Carolyn always did appreciate life's little jokes," Cole agreed, his voice stronger now after 3 days of proper treatment. The oxygen mask had been replaced by a nasal cannula, and color had returned to his face. "Remember the Christmas. She wrapped all our presents in newspaper because she'd forgotten to buy wrapping paper, and then claimed it was a statement about materialism." Sarah laughed. "I was, 12? So disappointed until I opened that art set I'd been begging for." Mara watched their easy banter from her chair, marveling at how quickly they'd fallen back into rhythm once the walls of pride and fear had crumbled. Her own discharge was scheduled for tomorrow, though she'd barely used her room, spending most of her time here. "Speaking of presents," Sarah said, pulling a familiar silver star from her purse. "Elena found this on your mantle, Mara." Said it. Looked important. Cole's eyes softened at the sight of his daughter's childhood ornament. "I was carrying it when you decided to break in a wild horse alone in a snowstorm." Sarah's tone was teasing, but held an edge of lingering fear. "Yeah, we're still talking about that later, Dad." Looking forward to it, he reached for Mara's hand. "Though I have to say, some good came from my stubborn foolishness." "Careful," Mara warned with a smile. "You're starting to sound like one of those Hallmark movies Mrs. Henderson loves so much. Next, you'll be saying it was all part of some divine plan, wasn't it?" Sarah asked quietly. "I mean, what are the chances? A former trauma nurse living exactly where Dad needed her most. Mom would have called that a God thing for sure." The photo seemed to glow in the late afternoon light. 3 people who'd been strangers a week ago, now bound by something deeper than crisis. Mara thought of her own family, the call she'd finally made yesterday, her mother's tears, her sister's immediate offer to fly out, the bridges she'd thought burned, just waiting to be rebuilt. "The clinic director called," she said, watching Cole's face carefully. "They need someone 3 days a week, starting after New Year's. Nothing too strenuous, mostly routine care and minor emergencies. Plenty of time for helping with the ranch." "Books," Cole observed, trying to sound casual. "And maybe the occasional sunset viewing from the north pasture? And weekend painting sessions," Sarah added hopefully. "I've already talked to my boss about working remotely part-time. Denver's only 6 hours away, and with video calls, sounds like you two have it all planned out." But Mara's heart swelled at their eagerness to include her, to make space in their healing family. "Not everything." Cole's voice turned serious. "Sarah, honey, would you grab my wallet? Left drawer." Sarah complied, curiosity evident on her face. Cole withdrew a folded paper, handed it to Mara with slightly shaky fingers. "Deed to the east pasture," he explained as she opened it. "Previous owner passed away last spring. Land's been sitting empty. Beautiful spot. Good light. Plenty of room for, say, a small house, if someone wanted to put down roots." Mara stared at the document, emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "Cole, no pressure," he added quickly. "Just possibilities. Something to think about while we're all healing." Sarah watched them both, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'll get us some coffee," she said tactfully, squeezing her father's shoulder before slipping out. Alone, Mara finally let her own tears fall. "You're supposed to be resting, not planning real estate ventures." "Had to do something during those long night hours." He tugged her gently closer. "Besides, doctor says I need motivation to get stronger. Pretty sure building a future counts." They kissed him softly, mindful of his oxygen line. "You're impossible, so you keep saying." His thumb brushed away her tears. "Stay anyway." The photo watched over them, proof that broken things could be mended, that new families could grow from winter's hardest storms. Through the window, snow was falling again, but gently now, not a threat but a blessing, a clean slate. "Well," Mara said finally. "Someone has to keep you from breaking in wild horses. Is that a yes?" "That's a let's see what blooms in spring." But she was smiling as she said it, her heart already knowing what her head was still processing. Sarah returned with coffee and a nurse in tow, the latter carrying fresh bandages and medication. But she paused in the doorway, clearly reluctant to interrupt the scene before her. "It's okay," Mara assured her, years of hospital experience recognizing the hesitation. "We've got all the time in the world now, and for the first time since the accident," she truly believed it. The house keys gleamed new and bright against the weathered wood of Cole's front porch railing. 1 month after the storm that had changed everything, Mara stood watching the sunset paint the north pasture, in shades of gold and rose, just as Cole had promised it would. "Penny for your thoughts, Doc?" Cole's voice was strong again as he joined her, moving carefully but steadily. Weekly physical therapy sessions, which he'd only agreed to attend if she did the same, were slowly rebuilding his strength. "Just wondering what my trauma team would say if they could see me now." She leaned into him as his arm slipped around her waist. "Country doctor, part-time rancher's girlfriend, surrogate stepmother to an artist. Regrets, only that I waited so. Long to start living again." She touched the keys, feeling their potential. The small house on the east pasture wouldn't be ready until summer, but that felt right somehow. Time to let all their healing take root. The screen door creaked behind them as Sarah emerged, paint smudges on her hands and joy on her face. She'd spent the day setting up her temporary studio in Caroline's old sewing room, each brushstroke a bridge between past and future. "Eleanor says dinner's ready," she announced, "and she's not taking no for an answer, even if you two are having a moment." "Heaven forbid we keep Elena waiting," Cole chuckled. "She's been feeding Strattons for 30 years, and she's not about to stop now." They made their way inside, where warmth and light and the smell of home cooking wrapped around them like a blessing. The dining room table was set for 5, Elena and Miguel joining them, as they had every Sunday since Cole's release from the hospital. The old Christmas star hung in the window, catching the last rays of sunlight. Sarah had insisted on leaving it up, a reminder of the night that had brought them all together. Below it, a new photo frame held 3 images. The hospital snapshot, a picture of Caroline holding baby Sarah, and a shot of the north pasture in snow, taken the day Mara had found Cole. "Before we eat," Sarah said as they settled around the table, "I wanted to show you something." She retrieved her tablet, pulling up a digital canvas. "It's just a sketch, but I thought, for the new house." The painting took Mara's breath away. It showed the covered bridge where they'd taken shelter, but transformed. Spring wildflowers bloomed around its weathered walls, and light streamed through its windows. In the foreground, 2 figures walked hand in hand, one with a slight limp, one with a cowboy's hat, while a third figure sat nearby at an easel, capturing the scene. "Sarah?" Cole's voice was rough with emotion. "It's perfect. Mom always said art should tell a story," Sarah explained softly. "And this one, it's about finding home in unexpected places, about how sometimes we have to get lost before we can be found." Elena wiped tears from her eyes as she served the food, while Miguel raised his glass in a silent toast. They'd all been part of this journey, this gradual thawing of frozen hearts. "Speaking of getting found," Mara said, reaching for Cole's hand under the table, "the clinic board approved my proposal. We're starting a rural outreach program in the spring, basic medical care for outlying ranches, emergency response training for ranch hands, helping other stubborn cowboys who won't go to the doctor," Cole teased. "Something like that." She squeezed his fingers. "Though none quite as stubborn as you." "Thank God for that," Sarah laughed, passing the bread. "One's quite enough." The conversation flowed easily after that, plans and stories weaving together like threads in a tapestry. Sarah's next art show in Denver, where she'd feature Wyoming landscapes. Cole's ideas for expanding the ranch's breeding program with Miguel's expert help. Elena's determination to teach Mara proper ranch cooking before the wedding. That last one made both Mara and Cole blush, but neither corrected her. Some things they'd learned didn't need to be rushed. Love could unfold as naturally as seasons changing, as surely as winter giving way to spring. Later, after dishes were cleared and goodbyes said, Mara stood again on the porch. The stars were emerging, brilliant in the Wyoming night sky, and her leg ached with the good tiredness of a day well lived. The new keys caught the porch light, no longer just metal, but a promise of home, of family, of all the healing yet to come. Ready to come in? Cole called softly from the doorway. Mara smiled, turning toward his voice, toward their future. Yes, she said, I'm ready.